What are the four different levels of being a director?
Again, I'll preface, there's no higher level of importance per se. It's just like, and maybe it's not a totem pole, maybe it's a, it's a hieroglyphic wall that goes left to right. But I think you've got short films and web series. And in that space, you're doing things that are narrative, but they're going to take less time, at least on the production end. You could do a short film that takes a great deal of prep, but typically, just with the amount of money being spent and the nature of the content, I think you've got short film and web series. I think then you've got commercials and music videos and branded content, and those are maybe the distinguishing factor to consider is that you're outright selling a product, right? Like you're selling this, lotion. You're selling this. Some of the stuff I did in my day was like this kind of sponsored documentary profiles where a brand might want to interview a bunch of people about what they do, but like that type of person is their direct customer. You know what I mean? So it's much more of a clear intent to sell. And then I think you've got television, which is obvious, and then you've got feature films, which are obvious, but the distinction being it's the medium for the director in features and it's the medium for the writer in TV. And I think, I would offer that trying all of them and being able to direct in all of them is a great skill set to develop because you never know when one of them will be called upon. So as an example, I did the 5th episode of the final season of Silicon Valley. And so it's just like, it's this whole, it was inclusive of an opening, a Mad Max kind of opening with Russ Hanneman, and he's on a motorcycle and these women in these kind of Mad Max cars are chasing him, and it's, he's blowing them up like with this hand gesture or whatever. And so HBO being HBO was like, oh, let's go shoot the thing. So I was like, oh, we're gonna actually shoot that. So we took an extra day outside of our production window for the episode and shot that thing. But then there was also the character sold a tequila in the show called Tres Comas, which 3 commas for being a billionaire. And so HBO and an ad agency partnered up to actually sell that tequila. So the last part of that 5-hour window where I shot the Mad Max scene was getting like 18 different lines of him selling the vodka, which would be used for online commercials. And it was like, oh, I got y'all. They were like, how are we gonna? I was like, I got this. Here's how we'll shoot it. The motorcycle will pull up, he'll step off, I'll get each line in, I'll get half of them in this shot, we'll reset, I'll get half in that shot, it'll take us about 10 minutes. And it was like this thing I had done, it's kind of a running theme that this thing I had done for all these years was like now a very great asset for what I was doing at that moment. And even like, a lot of the documentary stuff that I did, you'd have to walk into a room and say, okay, I'm thinking of, for my documentary on the Black Tankers, 761st, we secured an interview with General Colin Powell, and we had 15 minutes of his time. And like, that was like 14 plus 1 to take a photo, right? And so got down to Virginia, and they're like, you can do it in this room. And this room was like the office furniture cemetery. So in 20 minutes, they were like, okay, get all that stuff out of here. Let's leave that chair. All right, we're gonna gel the windows. I think I saw a flag in the lobby. Let's go get the flag from the lobby. All right, there's a plant. And doing that like has helped me with production design when walking into a location that is a potential location for an episode, but I have to envision what it could look like. before I can, say I think this works or not. Like everything we walk into isn't what it will ultimately be. So I feel like I've left the farm and entered in another world here, but there are all these like takeaways from each of these kind of 4 types of directing that I think help you in your execution of each other one.
Sure. And then also, too, managing stress and also having the confidence to say, I can do that, and I'm sure totally different world, being in Virginia, getting maybe security clearance to go
Right.
somewhere and interview this man
Right.
versus what seems like it would be a really fun set, Silicon Valley, but I'm sure there's a lot of moving pieces and just
Right.
the pressure, but saying, yes, I can do that. That's
Right.
really cool. Yeah. I mean, so many great directors started doing product,
Yeah, I think if you can tell a story in 30 seconds, and be aware of who your audience is, be aware of what the brand thinks of itself, because that's really the guiding, the North Star for how you need to choose your production design, your wardrobe, your frame composition, like all of those things. If you can do that in 30 seconds, that's one type of story, Then if you can take that and you actually understand, human beings and their emotions and their wants and needs and subtext, I think it just makes you very capable at doing this job.
How much time did you spend at each of those levels?
One thing I often say is I'm platform agnostic. So that's the flip side of like, that's the end game of delivery, right? Like, I don't care if it's TV, film, I guess Quibi came and went, but I thought that was cool. Web is great with me. Like if it's a story I'm interested in, where it ends up, fine with me. I have the same feeling for the, so-called levels that we're talking about too. Like I would make a short film next weekend if I had a script, because there's a different challenge of short filmmaking, which is it's about an event and you introduce a status quo, you introduce an event, and you then are left to imagine how the world resolves itself after this event has impacted the protagonist's world or life. So I would do that next weekend in between directing an episode of television, I'm writing a script now, a feature script. I'm co-writing a heist script that I hope to make, as soon as I can finish it between directing these shows. And I still have a commercial agent. So they all kind of coexist to me. But in the years where the goal was to get to TV, I would say it was, feature filmmaker, it was like feature filmmaker and short filmmaker from 99 to 08, because I made my short that went to Sundance. I made another short that went to a bunch more festivals in 04. I made Premium and 761st in that time. So I'm kind of jockeying back and forth. And then from 08 to 2015, I made a couple web series. I made another short film that brought me back to TV. And I was writing feature scripts all that time as well. And then now, let's say from 2015 to 2022, I've made a narrative podcast, that was going to be a short film, but with COVID, I couldn't personally absorb the COVID costs that would be put on the production in terms of testing and everything that would go with that. So I was like, well, let's do a narrative version of it, an audio podcast, and I'm very proud of it.
What's it called? Sorry.
It's called Wednesday Morning. And it's centered around, it was like a conversation around the 2020 election, but in a very surreal kind of discreet charm of the bourgeoisie scenario. And, you know, I got to work with my wife, who's an actor, Kelly McCreary, Coleman Domingo, who's an actor, Spencer Garrett. So it was great to just, you know, the thing that I learned from that project was it was kind of easier to get people for the narrative podcast because it was, no one worked for more than 2 hours because it was like, all right, you're 12 to 2 in the studio and we'll get your, you know, your character in this 50-page script and we'll knock it out. And so that had my mind clicking of like, I need to write another narrative podcast because then that could maybe be something that becomes intellectual property and then can transition to a TV show like Homecoming, the Sam Esmail project. So anyhow, I feel like that for me, it's like wherever a story can live is the best place to put it. And live might be the different format. You know, you might say, well, I can explore more of this world or this character in TV versus 2 hours with a film. Great. You might also be having to consider money. And so maybe the same idea and the themes of that are better served in a short film because you have $5,000 and can make a short, which is better than an idea that you just talk about. So I think they're all just like, they're almost like lenses, you know, like which lens is your favorite? Well, the one that gets the shot.